Hey, folks,
Hello,
welcome. Oh,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Paige.
Go ahead. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our group coaching free webinar today. We have the pleasure of having Chris McNamara on the call today. He's one of our MAPS group coaches. Just to let you all know, this is being recorded. So, and it will be sent out to everyone that has registered for this webinar. So if you know someone that's not available to attend, you can also send them this free webinar link. It will be sent out today. And that is all for me. So Chris, you can go ahead and get started.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Paige. Folks, welcome again. This is Chris McNamara, and really appreciate you investing time with us for this half-hour informational webinar. Now, part of it's going to be about what Never Ending Referrals, the course is, yet if you're like me, when you come on a webinar, you immediately want to walk away with something. So the first couple of things I wanted to share with you is not just with a webinar, with any campaign that you send out to, say, your sphere of influence. Most of the time we're asking, these three questions in this order, if we're going to be satisfied with what we do. And the questions are this, is number one, can I do it? Do I have the training? Do I have the education to take on this task and really get it done? The second question is, will it work? So if I do all this stuff, if I make these calls, if I follow the script, if I take a look at my sphere of influence and I organize it in this way, if I feed it daily, if I communicate with it systematically and then work all the leads that come from it, will it work? Or is it just like the Ron Popeil grill, which was a set it, forget it system, and it's the one thing that was ever sold on QVC that got returned the most because people would set it, forget it, and it would burn the house down. So will it work is the second question. The third question is sometimes the most important. We're going to drill down on this a couple times today. The third question is it worth it? If I spend my time doing this activity, if I spend my time following up with my sphere, if I spend my Sunday nights planning out what my calls are going to be to my sphere of influence and what that message is it worth it? And there's a couple different budgets that you're working with there, one of which is going to be your time budget. The second is going to be your energy budget. And the third, sometimes the most important, is your capital budget. Yet you and I both know that sometimes you can trade money for time and it's not the best investment ever. So those are usually the three questions that we'll consider when we think of your sphere of influence when you start talking about your database. One of the ideas that we kick off a few of our sessions with are what you see on the screen right here. And these are three different professions, and no, they're not all matching haircuts. It's the travel agent, blockbuster video store owner, and the real estate agent. And Steve likes to say, all right, so what do these three people, what do these three professions have in common? So if you're in front of your computer right now in the questions box, I want you to just see if that keyboard's working and type in, what do these three professions have in common? And by the way, I'll give you a hint. It's not as much a what as it is a who. Now, if you haven't been on GoToWebinar before, there's a control panel on your right-hand side, and that's what's going to give you an idea as to where you can write in things and download items. So if we're saying technology, or they're all ousted or they became obsolete, you're very close. The who is Richard Barton. Richard Barton was one of the gentlemen who started out Expedia.com. Richard Barton sat on the board of directors for Netflix, which was the David and Goliath winner of that battle, where Blockbuster said it was just a trend. With real estate agents, very, very similar. He's involved in Zillow Corporation. And what that particular business is attempting to do, and there are a couple other third parties that are out there, is use this term, disintermediate, replace the real estate agent, at least as a first point of contact for getting real estate information. Now, whether you subsist on a diet of web leads, or if it's solely through open houses, whatever your diet is, part of your diet for real estate business is going to come from your sphere of influence. Now, your sphere of influence could also be your center of influence. It's your have-met database. It's the people around you that fit this qualification. These are the folks that you let behind the velvet rope. And these are folks who know you. They can pick you out of a lineup. They know that you sell real estate, whether it be commercial, residential, business opportunity, vacant land, condos, whatever it is. They know that you sell real estate, and now they may or may not use you. Now that kind of covers a series of different masters there. Yet really, the most important parts are they know who you are, they can pick you out of a lineup, and they know that you sell real estate. Whether or not they use you is completely up to them, where they are in the course of their journey. Now, that decision right there is really what the course that we teach is all about. And it came from the idea of most of us get disintermediated because we are seen as just a realtor. Now, I remember talking with an agent about their business. They were doing a good amount of business, like 250, 260 units a year. They were doing great. Yet they drove home after a great week and they saw their neighbor had just listed with one of their competitors. And after talking with her for a little bit, she said, and I heard the 9 words that every real estate agent it curdles their soul. She didn't want to hear them. And here they are. I don't know why I didn't think of you. And it was at that point she realized that with all the pursuing of expired listings, of for sale by owner, of web leads, of developing geographic farms, that the sphere of influence, the folks that are within 3 to 4 feet of us, those core advocates, the allied resources or business to business leads that are in our Met database, and the network people, the people that are right there on the fence, that was the one portion of business that she hadn't concentrated on. And here's the most interesting thing that caused us to start taking a look at designing a course around this was we found out that there were a lot of people who shared that. We almost saw referrals coming from our family and our friends and our past clients is a bonus, something that we didn't necessarily have to concentrate on, just kind of cross our fingers and click our heels, and it was just something that showed up. Yet with that mentality, you could really get intentional about this. And I'm sure you'd agree already, maybe one of the reasons why you're on here is how do I get more intentional? So let's start off with just this conversation that Steve Schlueter is my business partner and co-author of this program. He had it with Gary Keller. And Gary Keller just explained really basically what 4 levels of commodities are. And the danger we have if we don't communicate with the people around us is we'll stay at a standard commodity level. A standard commodity is would be a book on Amazon, or it's going to be a song off of iTunes. No matter where you buy it, it's going to be the exact same product. And standard commodities obviously can be transferred from one place to another. So if the people who are around you see you as somebody who solely opens up doors, or all contracts are the same, or all negotiation skills are the same, then you might be in danger of just being viewed as a standard commodity. Now, if you're able to write something down right now, I want you to write down two words, one next to another. On the left-hand side, I want you to write down risk. And on the right-hand side, I want you to write down value. If there's low risk, there's low value. This is like the gym membership that starts off January 1st at $7 a month. No big deal. Hey, listen, because if you sleep in or if you just miss a workout, it's no big deal because it's just $7. It's the world's quickest negotiation there. The next level up, it's a choice commodity. And this is where, if you fly with an airline, for example, the example on the screen, if I fly through American, I may be leaning a little bit closer to Southwest because, well, I've got more miles with them. Or maybe I'll get in the preferred seating, or whatever the case is. There's just a little bit less risk and a little bit more value for me. So we're kind of tweaking those levers and hitting those buttons a little bit. This is where somebody will wait for that agent. Hey, listen, can you show me this property after work today? Well, no, I don't have time until 5 o'clock. That's okay. You're worth waiting. That's not the client that's going to hang up with you and call the listing agent and just go see the property, because at that point, an agent's just that standard commodity. A choice commodity is when there's a little bit more benefit, you're removing a little bit less of the risk. Now, when you go up to a custom commodity, that's one level higher. If you're a golfer, or if you enjoy fine clothing and you know that a tailored suit feels better than any other suit that's out there, or with golf clubs, if you know that you're a little bit taller, or your swing's a little bit different, or maybe you like a different stiffness of your shaft, or maybe you just like the nicer things in life because you've earned that. That's where a custom commodity comes in, where you want a little bit more tailoring, a little bit more tweaking. And with a custom commodity, again, there's a higher risk if you gamble there. And if you want to define gambling, gambling is placing a wager or a bet on an unsure outcome. Investing those when you do a little bit more research and you've got a little bit more intelligence about that. In fact, you've changed your perspective and you just upped your focus a little bit. Now, finally, there's that unique commodity, and the unique commodity is really the end-all, be-all. That's that restaurant that you call up to make a reservation, and they say there's a 6-month waiting period, and in the back of your head, it's validating for you because it validates your taste. You've got great taste, yet you've also got popular taste, and there's got to be a reason why this is such an in-demand product and an in-demand service. Now, as real estate agents, to become that unique commodity, well, it's sometimes, well, I've got the listing and there's no lockbox on it. Sometimes it's I work 24 hours a day. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Sometimes it's I've taken the time to get to know you and what your wants are and what your needs are. And I know that, if there's a home that's listed on the MLS and it's got 3 bedrooms, I know your family, and I know that you're probably looking for 4 bedrooms. I also know that maybe you just need an office and you can transfer that into a bedroom later. I know enough about you where I've taken time to invest in the relationship where now I can answer you in a paragraph versus a sentence. Think about a couple other ways that we've started to create ourselves as a unique commodity in the real estate market versus just being a standard commodity. What about your communication? If you practice your scripts in such a way that you really are interested, you're asking open-ended questions, and they're based off of your behavioral style, does that bring you up to a unique commodity, or are you stuck somewhere down your standard because maybe you don't practice scripts? We started to take a look at designing this program. It was with the idea that Tony Vasello had gone out on the shift book tour, and he was talking with people about there's a shift in the market, and sometimes some of our focus has to shift. Sometimes our weekly conversations have to shift, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. And so we started talking about the idea of communication with people who aren't buying houses. 4 or 5 years ago, the average was about 4 to 5 years everybody would buy a new house. Gary Keller's been saying from the stage for the last 2 to 3 years that that's gone up, and it's gone up quite a bit. It's gone up to about 9 to 11 years. So that idea of repeat business, well, that timeline has just it's increased a lot. So now we're looking towards our sphere of influence, our family and our friends, not as much for repeat business, more so as referral business. Yet how do you have that conversation if they're not thinking about buying another home soon? They're not thinking about listing their home soon, not to the point of 9 or 11 years. We've got to have a lot more valuable conversation and be able to explain about what's going on in the market in such a way that not only they understand it, they appreciate it. We need to identify areas of risk, taking a look at your paper, areas of risk that it could come in contact with between those 9 and 11 years, and bring value to it, and value to them more so than it is just to us. It might be great to send them out a postcard right around daylight savings time. If that holds no value to them, the risk of going with somebody else really isn't that big a deal to them. Now, Tony went from room to room to room to find out how often we're communicating with people, because he knew that there were about 2 questions that really matter when you think about communicating with your sphere of influence. The first of which is how often? How often are we speaking to our family and friends? How often are we speaking to our Met database? The 33 touch, if you start to do the math, if you have somebody in your database that's on a 33 touch, you're communicating with them about 11 days. And that's great. That's a good start, unless there's not a high quality there. And that's the second portion of it. If it's mostly emails and it eliminated the call option, that may not be the most effective form of communication. It's like, door knocking at 3 o'clock in the morning. You can knock 400 doors, yet may not get the response that you want or the capture rate that you want. So instead, he said, all right, so in each of these rooms, I want you to raise your hand, or in fact, stand up, which is stand up if you have a 33 touch in place. And in most of the rooms, right around 15%. So in rooms of 800 to 900 people, you've got 15% of there. So whatever that is, do the high C, high structures will do the math. See, that's right around 33 or 50 people in the room. Then he said, I'm going to ask a qualifying question. How many of you are doing a true 33 touch, meaning that you're still including those 3 to 4 contacts in person or over the phone a year? And all of a sudden, folks started to drop down. And room after room after room, it showed up being 3%. And we started calling this the 3% crisis. Now, there are optimists on the webinar right now who are saying, great, there's a 97% opportunity. And that's when we started to take a look at how we're going to structure this course, and how we're going to put this together. Now, we have the option of doing 8 weeks, or even doing a short 6-week class, but we knew one thing's for sure, and that's if we're going to do this, we've got to be in it for the long haul. And for most real estate agents, long-term planning is lunch. Yet we wanted to completely crush that and figure, if we've got a large sphere of influence, we know we're going to contact them 3 to 4 times every year in person. Let's just say it's 4. Let's just put together a plan for best case scenario and say most agents, if they contact their sphere of influence by phone 4 times every single year, they'll be doing better than a lot of folks that are out there. So do the quick math with us. If we're going to contact them 4 times a year, we can either do a banner bold 100 every single day for 3 weeks, or we could start to separate our database out with a very, very simple system. And we'll go over what that system here is a little bit. We ended up with about 13 groups. In fact, no matter who you are, what business you run, we could take everyone's business and break it down into 13 different groups. And they're based off of something very simple. There's 26 letters in the alphabet. Everyone's last name starts with one letter. And so with this system, we just said, all right, we're going to contact two groups, or two letters every single week. So that would be, let's see, 26 divided by 2 is 13. Great. Now, if you take 52 weeks in a year, you divide that by 4, it's 13. So the math starts to work out. And one of the reasons why you might be here is you've got a humongous database and it's been so overwhelming to contact everybody in there. Well, it's just, you get started and maybe somewhere along the way, you get frustrated and you stop. Or it feels impossible to complete something because, well, heck, when you start back on Monday, there it is again, the same process. So instead, we decided with these 13 different groups, these 13 groups of 2 letters, that you'd have a beginning point and an end point. High Ds, or the folks that are really assertive out there, you'll love this because there's a time when you can shut it down. You can actually close down and feel like you had success that week. In fact, you also know that there's something that will prevent call bias. You can't complete that task. You can't complete that quest until all the folks in your database whose last name starts with A and all those folks whose last name starts with W, until all those folks are at least you've attempted to contact them, then the quest isn't finished. So there's a starting point and end point. What's even better is we thought, well, that would be a pretty boring class just to say, okay, this week we're going to call A and W's. Next week you're going to call B and E's. The week after that you're going to call D and O's. Now you notice the letters aren't successive here. There's a reason for that. And I want you to stick with me on this because we're going to go over what that is. Yet we knew that there were a couple of things that we wanted to cover. We wanted to cover items like, what's your behavioral style? Are you a natural talker, or are you somebody who just likes to get down to business? Do you really like to run the numbers with people, or you want to find out a little bit more about their family, about their situation, so that all the safety concerns are taken care of? So there's a whole session based around your behavior and how you contact your database on that. We knew that there were some folks who really enjoyed the business-to-business aspect of working with their sphere of influence. They're those natural connectors. They're great with putting this executive assistant over here with this hair salon, or putting, this person who just moved here from Minnesota over here with this temporary agent. Whatever it was, there were people who wanted to do business that they could make the contacts that way. We just had to structure a class around it. So there's 12 different sessions based off of 12 different conversations you can have around your database. And really, that was the biggest epiphany that Steve and I had when we saw people seeing success from this. Was it wasn't a magic pill. It was more of a vitamin. And when you took it weekly, the health of your database started to grow. And really, it was about having a couple different conversations, bringing a couple different perspectives in to take a look at really what you could do with your sphere of influence. What we found was that with those different mentalities, those different perspectives, we were getting a lot of different answers to those 3 questions we talked about at the beginning. Remember what those were, right? Is, can I do it? Do I have the training and education? Well, with each session, we're bringing the training and education for it. The second one is, will it work? And what's interesting is, well, they started finding that with a simple system of contacting just a certain group of people, it would work. The numbers were working in their favor. There was quality in the quantity. And finally, was it worth it? And that was really the next exercise we did. And I want you to walk through this with me. Steve had an agent who was in his market center who it was basically, she was starting bold. Let's just call her Mary for the sake of this. And she said, well, Steve, I'm having trouble just taking a look at really how I'm gonna make all these calls. Do I have enough people in my list where I'm gonna make these calls? And he said, well, let's take a look at your sphere of influence database and just go through a little bit of a gap analysis. So Mary, if we took a look at your database right now, how many folks would be in there? And Mary said, well, there's 200 people currently in my database. She said, great. If you took a look at 2016 and we went back through all your contracts, how many of those transactions, those deals, were a product of your sphere of influence? Like somebody who just referred you, they thought that you hung the moon and they recommended you to somebody else and they said, yes, she's the great person for the job. And Mary said, well, it's 12 transactions. You said, great. If we were to really concentrate and really get purposeful about this, I bet we could see 10%. 10% to start with over the course of 12 months. Now remember, that might be huge to do in just 1 month, yet we're doing it over the course of 12 months. It's chunk it down, and it's just a bite-sized piece that you can get in. And you said 10% of 200, that's really easy. That's 20 units. Now, if we took a look at the MREA, Gary talks about communication with your sphere of influence, that if you do it 2 to 3 years and you're staying on that 33 touch, and you're really building that relationship out, you can start to see a 12-to-2 ratio. Now, the math majors out there are saying, well, reduce that down, that's 6-to-1. 12-to-2 meant that out of every 12 people in your sphere of influence, that there would be one piece of repeat business and one referral. In a 12-to-2 ratio, about 17% return, that would mean 33 units. Now, if we're taking a look at Mary's database, to go from 12 to 33, well, that's a pretty big jump. Yet you've got 2 to 3 years to build out your systems for it. So anyone who's feeling, well, heck, that'd be a lot more business than I have systems for, that's okay. Remember, this is stretched out over the course of 36 months. If we took a look at just the next 12 months, though, to build your business out by another 8 units, Mary, I mean, if your average commission was $4,000, that would be an extra 32 grand. And that's just from your sphere of influence. That's not counting what you do with expireds. That's not counting with what you do with for sale by owners. And that's, by the way, off a database of 200 people. We found with the gap analysis, it was interesting because if she had started 12 months ago, if she had started 24 months ago, she would have 16 more units. So by not doing it, by not making that investment, by not concentrating, you could look at it 2 ways. She's either got $32,000 that she could earn next year, or last year she missed out on $32,000. If we check Mary's trash, there was 32 grand in there. If we checked her trash from the last 2 years, maybe there was 64,000 in there. You start to chunk this down, I mean, 20 units, if she did 8 more units, that's less than 1 more unit a month. And yet it really starts to pile up. And that's, by the way, solely with 200 people. Then Steve asked this great question. He said, I want to expand your mind about your database. I'm going to ask you the same one. If you won a contest and you won a contest for the 4th of July and you were allowed to have any performer you wanted there, who would you have? And Mary said, Beyonce. Great. Steve's is Zach Brown Band, mine's Journey. He said, if you were going to have Beyonce play in your hometown and the price of admission for the folks that you knew was just that they knew who you were and they knew that you were in real estate, how many people could show up there? How many people do you think that you could get from your hometown? And Mary said, well, shoot, at least 600 or 700. Steve said, well, wait, because we talked about your database and you said there was 200 people in there. Yet when we talked about the 4th of July exercise, there's a discrepancy there. So where are those folks not showing up in your database? Where are those folks not showing up in your call list? Where are those folks not showing up in your 33 touch? Or maybe that there are folks that you've met on Facebook that just haven't been transferred into some of your programs. And that was one of the exercises that we go through in the first session, just to expand your mind around really what your database is. As we started to go through that, we said, all right, let's put together a plan that everyone could follow. And we decided to take the concept of the 1-3-5. So you've got one purpose, you've got three objectives with the 1-3-5, and then 5 strategies. We expanded it out to 4 because we knew that there were 4 laws of the database. 4 laws that such by when you follow it, your database is going to be a success. And when I say your database, I mean your Met database at this point. So if we set a goal of, say, that 10% return, and then add 250 people on it, because we know that no matter what, your database is either literally or figuratively dying every day. It's a circle of life, Simba. So if that's our number one goal, well, let's follow these 4 laws: that build and organize it. Where am I going to put it in one place? And then organize it so I can very quickly access that information. Then I'll go to the second law, which is feeding it daily. Where am I bringing new people in? Where's my farm team? Who are those folks who are networks? And I build a relationship out with them, and they start to think of me as their real estate economist of choice. Then I want to figure out, how do I communicate systematically with them? Now, that's a little bit about frequency of communication. It's also about, well, what are some different ways I can communicate with them? Do I have a direct mail budget? Because we know that direct mail is extremely effective, just a lot of folks don't do it because, number one, sometimes it can hurt your budget a little bit. Number 2, we're not really sure what to send. Or number 3, we personally don't like getting junk mail, so I don't want to send junk mail that's out there, and that's our mentality around it versus, 84% of all decision makers pick up their mail. And if I really put together an item of value that I mail to them, that's that one piece of branding, that one piece of tactile evidence that, yep, I'm serious and I have a real business. Communicating systematically means frequency as well as value, as well as in a couple of different channels. Finally, there's the 4th law, and that's working all the leads, all the business that comes from it. So if that person may not be looking to list their property for another 5 years, yet they're looking for that perfect lawn person, we can access that, get back to them, and show them that not only we make a promise, we keep a promise, we're trustworthy, and that's what creates us as the real estate economist of choice. Now, for those of you who really like to get creative and say, I don't want to follow the rules, I'm going to create my own plan, that's where the 5 strategies came in, where each one of you, based off of what you're willing to do and what your behavioral style, where your natural energy lies, you come up with 5 strategies to fit each one of those 4 laws. How am I going to build and organize it? How am I going to feed it daily? How am I going to communicate systematically? And how am I going to work all the business that comes from it? Now, left up to our own devices, sometimes we'll come up with 1 or 2. So in each one of the 12 sessions, we suggest a couple. In fact, by the time we're done, I think there's about 66 different tasks or workshops that we go through, and there's a myriad of different options that you have. In fact, we interviewed 2 mega agents based off of what they did, one of which is the daily group around client event parties. Didn't like lead generation towards their sphere of influence, so they started holding client event, appreciation events, and now they're seeing a huge amount of business from it. Another interview we do with is Tony DeCello, who talked to us about how a very, very simple 33 touch program created at least 101 units every single year out of a database of 1,100 people that are in there. Here's an example is, one of the slides that we talk about, well, we don't just, breeze over what the concept is. We give you the actual pecking order of here's what the piece looks like. And when Alice Daly talks with her buyers and some of the clients that are coming through, they start talking about the client event right off the bat. Then we'll run through what the numbers of the event are. So we set up what your expectations are to really answer that question of, can I do it? Do I have the training and education? Whether or not it's worth it for you, go back to your own gap analysis and figure out, all right, so what's my 10% return? Every networking function you walk into, maybe you'll start to calculate what's my 10% return in here? What would be my 12 to 2 return on here? We talk about some of the scripts because a lot of the questions we'll get is, Chris and Steve, great. What do I say? What do I say if I haven't talked to them since closing? What do I say if they said, hey, really, we're all set. We already work with another real estate agent. Would it be okay to find out that there's probably about 3 or 4 different responses that not only will you be willing to say, but they'll make sense and they'll have more value for the person on the other side of the phone? Because, well, let's face it, somebody out there may have met a real estate agent before you. That's okay because you welcome competition. In fact, you welcome cooperation. Maybe you're building your team out and you like to work with somebody who's great and you'd love their recommendation. The 145 was a plan that kept bringing us back to, okay, with all the things we can do with our database, let's just refocus back. Remember, if we've got 12 weeks, we've got 12 different groups or 13 different groups in our database. Usually there's a week off for family reunion or a holiday or something. Yet with those 13 different groups, let's take a look at what the groups were. You'll notice that we didn't make the letters successive. We've got an A and W group, a B and E group, a D and O group, an H and V group. The reason why is this: we knew that if we made the letters successive, then it's just feeding into that set it and forget it mentality. Number 2, we saw a lot of people who are starting to organize their database, and they would get through, like, say, the first 4 or 5 letters, they lose momentum, and that way everybody whose last name started with, say, P, T, R, they weren't getting contacted at all. Then the agent would show up on Monday again and say, okay, we've got to do this, let's get reorganized. And they'd start at A again, and all the people at the back end of their database weren't getting contacted. So we created these themes almost as like a battle flag. So this week's theme would be, for the folks who are starting next week, would be A and W. Everyone whose last name that starts with A or W, they're going to get a contact. Now, what you say in the contact, that's completely up to you. If you'd like more scripts, if you'd like more training, we'll talk about that at the end of the webinar. In fact, we're getting close there. We decided to chunk it down to these 13 different groups because it kept things simple. And we know that in this world, this whirlwind of stuff that's out there with all the new software, that checkers was better than chess. Just in this particular case, you can get as chess as you want with other parts, yet with your database, sometimes we overthink it. And once we go into that overwhelm, even a simple plan like the 145, well, it can turn into one of those 8-page business plan book reports that goes into our desk and we never take a look at again. Instead, what would it look like if tomorrow your plan was just to contact everybody whose last name started with B and E and ask them when the last time they refinanced was? That's one of your contacts for the year. Could you call them up 3 more times for the rest of the year and check in on what community interests they have? Check in on what their plans are for moving in the next 5 to 6 years. Check in and see if there's anybody you could recommend that gives 5-star blue ribbon world-class incredible customer service. And those are your 4 conversations for the year. All the other pieces, including what you do on social media, feed into those 4 conversations. And whether you're somebody who's extremely, you love lead generation, you cannot take the phone away from your head, or maybe you're a little bit apprehensive, you'll decide on what's your favorite way to communicate with them. Maybe it's like the screen you see on here with social media. Maybe you're on Facebook wondering, how do I use this to build relationships out? Because we know that the end game is face-to-face. It's not Facebook to Facebook. Well, we spend an entire session on that. We spend an entire session on video communication. We take a look at what your marketing is. The difference between direct offers and indirect offers could be the difference between whether or not your flyer gets put up on the fridge or it gets thrown in the trash. Now here's what the stack looks like. This is all the stuff. Now with webinars, you and I both know, based on, same with this webinar, sometimes webinars can be a little bit difficult because you have that hour and then you got that workbook, and after you're done with that hour, there's no homework left over. Well, the learning is done. Yet if we're really talking about education versus training, training is when you go out and you apply the education. And that's why we put together 12 workbooks with exercises in it. We've got the 12 60-minute sessions that are recorded, so you can go back, much like this session, and re-listen over and over again. Well, would that be a big deal? When you're listening to scripts based off of the 5 points you use to call to get people to show up to your client event. Maybe you're looking for 3 closes that you use with people that maybe haven't had that much experience with you in real estate. Those are all included in the script book we give you right off the bat. We have a YouTube library of about, it's actually 50 plus now, how-to videos on things like, well, how do I organize my database? How do I just go through the whole sorting and scrubbing process? How do I take a look at downloading everybody I've ever met on Facebook and then sorting through them and choosing the folks that really belong in my Met database? Not suspects, actual prospects. We have, bonus exercises like the personal planner guide, which allows you to put together all the goals that you have for a particular year, so it starts to get worth it. We have over 30 marketing examples and templates that you can choose from. Now, by the way, this is all for the price of, and here's the infomercial part, this is all for the price of $297. So let's just round it up to 300. Based off of 12 weeks together, is it worth it? Well, with all that you see on here, sure it is. If for no other reason, then you're going to be having a conversation with yourself about your Met database at the same time every single week. And we know that what gets managed gets measured, and what gets measured gets managed. Yet each different week, we're taking a look at what's the information we're bringing in there and what's our focus on. And then we also have that focus group of the DTD2 group. By the way, DTD2 stands for doing the database too. And that's really your only embedded command for contacting your sphere of influence. Every week you'll be taking a look at that particular group. For my B and E group, I'm going to practice my social media connections on. With my I and Q group, I'm going to work on my video communication. And that way we've got that one particular focus group where we can start to attain the skill and then bring it to the rest of our database. I mean, hopefully a lot of this makes sense. Now, I'm looking to open up the questions portion here, but for some reason I keep getting the bing noise on that. Just wanted to go over a few other items on this. Here's what we went over today. Just if nothing else happens, if I get hit by a bus in the next 5 minutes, here's what hopefully you took away from today. Number one, we took a look at the commodity gauge, where you can gauge yourself almost in every relationship, whether or not you're a standard commodity or you're a unique commodity to that person. Maybe you'll bring it up to a group. Maybe you'll bring it up to your business-to-business partners. Maybe bring it up to your market center. Hey, where do we lie here? What takes us from a standard commodity up to that unique commodity level? We went through a gap analysis. And the math's simple enough where you'll be able to go through and do a gap analysis for every single one of your actions. Hey, listen, what's my return? Answer that question. Is this worth it? We took a look at the 4th of July exercise, just how one question could expand what your vision was based off of, all right, so who gets involved in my database? Just that what if expanded Mary's database by about 400 or 500 people. Not a big deal. 10% returns, 50 units times 4,000. It's just $200,000. That might be worth it. What's the purpose of the groups? What's the idea of chunking this down? And could I apply this model to other pieces of my business? We're going to continue through that all the way through the 12 sessions. What's a Facebook strategy? Hey, what if I'm one of those folks who uses LinkedIn? What if I love using Pinterest or Instagram? All social media is based off the same algorithm. Say great things to the right people in the right frequency of time. So how do we structure that? Well, you're going to do it through your 1-4-5 and really start to not only figure out your strategy, what are some of the tactics you'll use in order to get there? Finally, we took a look at the 4 laws of the database. If you didn't get a chance to write them down, memorize these things, because these are the road signs that keep you on the highway to where you're going. First one's build and organize it. Get one place where your database exists. If it's on your technology and it's managed by a power button, talk to folks who just bought a Tesla car and the power went out in their town. What happened to their car? Keep your database somewhere where it's tactical. Then the second law of the database is feeding it daily, continually bringing new blood in there. Third is communicate systematically. Systematically means not only frequency, how often? Well, 33 touches every 11 days. Every 11 days. But it's also in a multi-channel approach, which could be through phone. It could be through direct mail. It could be through thank you cards. It could be through client appreciation events. And that's really what I dig about this business, is based off of you and whatever you did before this crazy business real estate we got in. You can bring your own talents, your own strategies, and just by simply putting it up next to a model where we've seen agents who are successful with it, you can now have your own strategy, one that you're willing to do. Finally, the fourth law is going to be working all the business that comes from it. Now, you and I both know it would be crazy to say that you're not going to follow up with a referral who wants to list their house tomorrow or buy a house this weekend. It's when we start to get into the long game. It's when we start to figure out, how do I create a relationship over the next 2 to 3 months that lasts for the next 10 to 11 years. Because let's face it, if somebody's not going to buy a property for the next 9 to 11 years, a lot of people will just put them on the back burner. Yet you'll be a business owner and you'll realize that, this person could still refer me business. They could still refer me, some incredible allied resources. They could still point me in the direction of some great hires that I could make. And I could still give them incredible service. Because when I said I was going to be their agent for life, I want to keep that promise. I want to come from contribution. I want to give more than I take. So when I call up, I don't feel like it's quid pro quo. Referrals become a byproduct of me just running an incredible blue ribbon, world-class, white glove customer service business. And then we're going to have the scripts to do that. We're going to have the models to do that. Now, for some reason, this is not allowing me. I'm going to go ahead and just close this down for a second. We'll see if that's on there. I just want to see if there are any questions that are on here. They're all business to business owners. If there are any questions on here, I want you to just do me a favor, go in the questions box and type those in. I'm going to reopen the slides for a second. Just wanted to make sure that we got the questions box open. Any questions you have? Hey, you know what? One thing I forgot about is I wanted to say thank you for spending time with us today. And there's a number of different folks that are on here. Say you decide, yep, you know what? I could definitely do the database thing by myself. For sure, everybody on this phone could, on this webinar could. Yet maybe I'm looking for partnership for it. I would love to register. Hey, where can I go to register? All you have to do is follow the link in the email that comes with you. And I want to make it worth it to you because you spent time with us today. If you write down the word alumni, ALUMNI, type in alumni. What that does is I think it knocks $50 off there. If you're going to invest time for free information to find out, all right, so how do I gauge myself as a commodity? How do I answer these 3 questions with my client? How do I go through and split my database into 13 different groups where no matter where I am, whether I'm on the beach, on the trail, or just thinking in my car, I can immediately file somebody into a calendar or schedule? Because we know if it's not in your schedule, it doesn't exist. I mean, the freedom of that simple system where no matter what, hey, you could hand your database on 3x5 index cards to my 12-year-old daughter, and she could sort this into what my business was going to look like regarding my sphere of influence for the next 13 weeks, and she can set that up. I mean, how does that open up who you can hire for your executive assistant, at least for your sphere of influence? I got a great question. My biggest problem is I have emails, but not phone numbers. Do I just delete these folks, or do I spend time researching? No, and here's what I would suggest you do, Deb. And by the way, you're part of a large support group. It's called Everybody. If you have a series of folks in your database where you don't have phone numbers for them, but you have their email address, send them just a really quick, you're basically going to ask them for permission. So the email would read something like, Deb, really quick, this is Chris from Keller Williams. Thanks for reading this email. Listen, I realize we've never spoken in person. Would you be opposed for me to drop you a quick call just to introduce myself in person? By the way, it won't take any longer than 4 minutes unless you ask me to. And really that just starts from a simple, I have the introduction, that thanks for reading this email. I'm going to state my hurdle, my problem, and then a really quick solution, and ask them basically, would you be opposed to it? Is there any reason why we shouldn't? Which is a negative close. It's one of the things we learned about in the script book. Just ask them for permission. By the way, Deb, right there, that's a great way to start sorting through and scrubbing into those 4 groups of your database. Because if I've got somebody in my database who's been in there for 5 years and they're not willing to write me back with their phone number, it's okay. I'm not going to delete them. They may just be somebody who loves to respond to email, or that's the level of relationship we're at right now. There's so many, allegories from lead generation to dating. I may not be there yet, so I may have to earn their trust a little bit. It could be through a PDF of the 5 hottest homes that sold in their neighborhood. It could be sending them a community calendar of what's going on in the summer that's that's going on in their neighborhood or whatever. That's just my offer for immediate response got no response whatsoever, so I may have to earn trust a little bit more. Tom said, I signed up last week and that alumni offer wasn't made to me. Can I get that $50 refunded to me? I don't see any reason why you couldn't, Tom. I love the idea of you being on here and you're investing even after you've already invested with us. So I say yes, do me a favor and email fasttrack@kw.com. I'm good at making calls, but I'd like to hand the rest off to an admin. Is it designed that way? It's a great question. Can I leverage out my sphere of influence calls to other folks? No, I think you could leverage out your marketing. Part of it's going to be that there are going to be some calls you'll want to make on your own. You'll still want to stay in contact with that person. A lot of the teams, as they grow bigger, the core advocates and the advocates, those folks at the top who refer us a lot of business, they're going to get a personal call. And there's nothing wrong with having somebody call up and just say, really quick, this is Chris calling from the Robert Crowell team. Robert asked me to give you a call and find out how are things going in your neighborhood. Did you know that your neighbor's house sold for 95% of the listing price? Can we send you our quarterly report as to what houses in Schlueter are selling for? Really quick, thank you so much. Is there anything Robert and I can do for you before we let you go? Fantastic. Take care. And at that point, they're really we're promoting our systems versus just you, Robert. You're probably gonna have to make contact with that person at some point if you want to keep that relationship at least where it is or graduate it up. Yeah, you can totally leverage it out. I think it's a great idea. Some agents hold on to every lead forever. I don't. I purge frequently. Will this work for me? I'm going to give you the political answer of it may depend. And the idea of purging is great. If it's Daffy Duck and they give you a phone number of 555-1212, maybe not going to make the top of the dance card. Yet realize that as this length of time has gone out, where people are researching, they're researching what 12 to 18 months before they even step across the threshold of a house, which means our competition for their attention has just gone into discretionary time. So consider that, when somebody hops on your website and they fill out their information, you're competing for their time against the movie that they're downloading. You're competing for time against the Amazon.com order. So your message may be just a little bit bigger. It's just a longer cultivation period, which isn't going to take up a lot more of your time. It's just going to change your message out a little bit. You'll be graduating people. One of the clients we work with from Alaska decided they were just going to change the way they were looking at it and said, from now on, I'm hiring people into my database and I'm going to have a training program. And the part of the training program is just, what do they respond to? What particular type of content? And there's a lot of content in marketing that we'll talk about that you can leverage towards large groups, yet there's nothing that will ever replace that one-on-one contact. And if we do it well and it's worth $4,000 to $5,000 on average for a typical commission, that may be worth it to you. Yet for them to pick up the phone, that may take a little bit more marketing. That may take a little bit more about building trust. How do you build trust? We actually have a 3-part strategy on how anybody can build trust. It's whether or not they do the work. Taking vitamins is pretty tough. I'm a buyer's agent on the team. I have a database of about 70 people that I've met, but I have a database with close to 400 people that I've never met. They come from social media or internet leads that I've never even really spoken to. How do I convert them into Mets? It's a great question, Derek. There are a lot of folks out there that do. Consider that the old definition of somebody who is a Met was somebody that you've met in person. Yet, technology with Skype, how many people here have sold to clients you never met them until you handed them the keys to their house? It's more about building a relationship, and if they're asked who's their top real estate agent, they mention you and they can pick you out of a lineup. My first suggestion would be to get on to contact those folks and just ask them, hey, if we're going to spend a lifetime of business being a business partner together, what are some things I can do for you over the course of the next 6 to 12 months? And if I did these items, would you feel comfortable recommending me to a friend or a family member? And if you were comfortable, would you go out of your way? Could I count on you to send me at least one referral this year? And if I don't see one by 6 months, is it okay if I contact you and ask you really quick, what's up? There's a real fierce conversation. Yet it's a great business conversation of, listen,